And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
It was 1776 when the founders signed the writ of independence from the Brits. It was revolution.
Welcome to the Republic for the United States of America. You may call me Kelby. I am an American. Today is the 26th of May 2016, and tonight's RNN featured show is Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. The RNN, which stands for the Republic News Network, has been doing these calls for over 6 years, and it's always been a friendly introduction for the people of the United States Corporation. It's true. The United States is a federal corporation, and their exclusive jurisdiction lies within the District of Columbia. And you can find this in the law under Title 28, Section 3002 and UCC 9-307H. The Republic government was just a bunch of U.S. citizens that realized they wanted to be Americans again, as our founders intended. So we've been hard at work now for 8 years, and we've successfully re-inhabited the original government vacated under Lincoln in 1861. I know it's hard to understand. Don't worry. We are law-abiding, peaceful Americans and very pro-government. You can consider the Republic members are tired of all the corruption. So we found in the law that there's in fact two forms of government on our land, and we did something about it. We are the people. We're just like you, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. We have families. We simply found some truths, and now we're sharing these important truths with the rest of the world to get ready to hear things that sound amazing and get ready to understand that you too can be a part of history. We welcome each one of you to the Republic for the United States of America. Please bow your heads with us in prayer. Father God, this nation is in distress. We need your help. Lord, come. Give us assistance, guidance, counsel, whatever we need to properly seat a de jure government which is under you, the sovereign, not under a corporate rule. So Lord, bless this call, bless the guests, and help us to understand what we need to do in our own roles to stand up and just not sit back and watch. We pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to yield the floor to Mr. Dan.
Yeah, good afternoon, folks. Good afternoon, Kelby, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to introduce a great friend of mine. Gentleman that I've known for a very long time. His name is Elias Alias, and he is a gentleman that's been intimately involved with the founding and the growth of Oath Keepers, and also a group called the Mental Militia, which he's had for quite a long time. And at this point, he is taking off with that concept, and I just really am pleased to introduce him to the show because I think he will be tremendous glue to bring much of the liberty movement together. And Elias, I'd like to have you kind of introduce the concept of the Mental Militia, if you would, please.
Thank you very much, Dan. Am I coming through okay on this phone?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, the Mental Militia is a militia of the mind, regimenting our thoughts, learning to understand how we may have been conditioned, falsely or wrongly trained, programmed, distracted by media, and deceived by government proclamations, discovering that we need to reassert ownership over our very thoughts, our very own personal minds, is the first step in seeing a true vision of freedom. My premise is self-ownership is the opposite of slavery, and self-ownership begins by owning your own mind. We all have a mind. We all use our minds to create our lifestyles, our careers, our passions, and our works. And we yet are barraged an endless array. Everything from billboards and neon signs to television, to movies, to newspapers, to edicts issued forth from the government. We're barraged constantly with a never-ending stream of distractions. And these can build up a barrier of sorts in our own minds to our better view of, say, an unaltered perception of what's really real. The American people comprise everybody's mind altogether. They comprise the group mind, as Edward Bernays mentioned in his little book from 1928 called Propaganda. So the mental militia is going to do several things. One of the things we will be doing is inspiring people to question their own mental states in a healthy way, to learn how to see how they may have been influenced or conditioned to follow into deceptions, and how to get rid of those kind of deceptions and attain our own pure inner vision powers to control our own minds. Once a person has that, he's on the road to establishing what Thomas Jefferson mentioned as unalienable rights. He's able to start establishing a cognizance of his own sovereignty, of his own autonomy as a human soul. This is all necessary at the individual level before our communities can reflect this, and before our states and our national government would reflect this also. So that's a premise. We have other premises also, but a second premise is, by George, we're going to have to help our neighbors understand it's important to get over this left-right paradigm. We have to quit buying into this two-party system that over the course of the last century has brought this country to its knees and threatens our very existence as a sovereign nation state under threat of a United Nations program called Agenda 21. So all things tie together, all things are interrelated. Personal responsibility for the content of one's mind, how to regulate one's thoughts, and then how to extend that clarity to the family and then the neighborhood, the community, and ultimately to our whole body of Americans as the American people. So we are going to be doing psychological operations. We're going to be hammering away at the mass perception that has literally been engineered by the New York media, the Hollywood set, the television, the newspapers, and other pressures that come to us in our daily routines. We're going to do psychological operations to try to start undoing all that. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was going to say, Elias, that fits right in with exactly what we've been talking about over the last 8 or 10 weeks, and that's kind of why I felt like you would be a good fit for this show, because it does help to connect the dots. And what you're talking about is a return to a more traditional culture and a more traditional set of values, and to try to get people to refocus on what's really important in their lives, and that is truth and freedom and honor and the right to live your life as you see fit, as long as you're not violating somebody else's rights.
Yes, indeed. Spencer was the guy that alluded to the law of equal freedom, in which each of us, by nature, is free to do and be who and what we are, as long as we are not encroaching upon anybody else's right to do and be who they are. And that was pretty much taken for granted by the nation's founders' generation. And that's also a lead-in into the militia part of the name of my organization. It's a mental militia. The founders in their generation didn't even define what a militia was, because everybody then was in the militia. They all knew what the militia was. And it was a way of life. As Pastor Chuck Baldwin has remarked in one of James Yeager's films, the colonists took their guns to church with them on Sundays. They went out into the fields after church and did a little practicing with their guns. They kept guns. They wore guns everywhere. That is self-defense at the personal and community level, and it was written into the U.S. Constitution, so that if there was a problem, the president even had an authority to call forth these militia. And if the states agreed that the cause was just, the states could send up their militia on a presidential mission. So that was a way of life. That kept crime down. There was literally hardly any crime, unless you want to talk about the smuggling that was going on to get around King George's taxes. There was a, we call that crime. That was a very popular pastime with the colonists before the Revolution. The king was overbearing with taxes, and people like some of our New England shipping families were sneaking shiploads of goods into this country without paying taxes to the British throne on it. And the colonists all supported that. But back to the point, the system of society, the infrastructure of the culture, was that a person was responsible for his own defense, and he was also responsible for his neighbor's defense. We had a sense of community in that generation. We had a sense of moral obligation to see the togetherness of the people themselves and to live accordingly. Somebody lost a barn, the neighbors would come out and help build a new barn for them. They didn't turn to the government, by the way, and they didn't turn to an insurance company. It was the people taking care of themselves as a community. So that carries forward into the mental activity of human beings today. We need to learn again to see our brotherhood as Americans or as human beings, as citizens on this planet, or as free people on this planet. We need to see that sense of community and overcome the temptation that's pelted at us mercilessly that leads people to culture wars, race wars, religious wars, all of these conflicts. And the political media loves to play that up. That sells tickets, it sells newspapers, and it sells viewerships on TV programs and what have you. But we, the people, are all born with one thing that was not created by a corporation, and it was not created by a government, and that is our unalienable rights. We have souls that no government and no corporation can duplicate, but they do try to control what we do as human souls. They want to control. Yeah. So the Mental Militia wants to get rid of the left-right paradigm. We want to look at the higher evidences of the miraculous beauty in life itself. Get back to loving our neighbors, loving ourselves, respecting each other, honoring the moral codes that made America great. And that means building the country anew by focusing on the individual and then his family and then his community.
That's right, Elias. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you're I know you're in total agreement with that approach to things. But it seems odd, Dan, that we have to even talk about something that used to be a given. Now we have to find the way back. You know, what have we lost? How do we get back to where we were? I don't know if you're as old as I am, but I can remember the 1950s as a very blissful peaceful, non-threatening, solid kind of secure lifestyle. As a boy, say a 10-year-old boy, I could take my .22 bolt-action rifle and a fishing pole, walk down the road and go fishing or go hunting, and nobody ever had, they wouldn't think a thing in the world about it. That's gone now.
Right.
We have horrible push to get rid of the people's guns. The government is just totally committed to trying to find every way in the world to disarm the American people. Now we have the
with that, Elias, and I'm gonna kind of interrupt here. With that, I don't want to get off our thought here, but with that in mind, I mean, the whole idea of a militia is every able-bodied man, and for that matter, woman, in a community being willing and ready and trained to help their neighbors to defend themselves. And that whole concept, and you outlined it very well, is based on the Christian belief, the golden rule, that we should love one another as we love ourselves, and love our neighbors as we would love ourselves. And that is a fundamental thing that, you know, I know you call yourself and have as long as I've known you, the old hippie. But you know, that's one of the things that came out of the hippie movement that made perfect sense, is that that sense of I guess belonging to the family of man.
Yes, sir. We used to say we are one, and you know, in Newton's physical universe that we all share here, the trees, the grass, the flowers, the animal life, the water and the earth, everything, it is all related and interrelated. Every little part of it is a part of the whole, and every little part of it is part of everything. So we're a part of all that. You can't remove any of those basic ingredients of life and still support human life on the planet. We have to have the water and the earth and all the elements. And we are born through biological processes. We are tied to natural law. And as such, we are beings who come into the world with an innate authority from what Thomas Jefferson called nature or nature's God. And there is the people that are power hungry, that seek to control or forge or shape and shift the shape of humankind. Those people end up in political positions of power, and the one thing they want to do is cause everybody to forget that we came from a higher source, and that we are part of that higher source just as much as we are part of the natural world we're walking around in. That's what governments and corporations do not want us to understand or to perceive. And that's one thing the Mental Militia will be talking about.
Well, you know, Elias, that whole concept of the Mental Militia, I think, is a fantastic idea, because you and I have talked about this before. And as one of the founders of Oath Keepers, you recognize that, first of all, that we have to have our law enforcement, our military, active and ex-military, and people who have been public servants that have sworn that oath to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution, to do that in defense of individual liberties and protecting people. Well, you know, we've talked about that a lot, and the bottom line is in a shooting war, if we're forced to get into a battle, a literal revolution, physical revolution, to retain control, or regain, I guess would be a better term, control of our country, if we don't have the minds and the souls and the hearts of our citizens behind what we're doing, we couldn't possibly win that battle.
Exactly. That battle will have to be won in our minds first. And if we win it properly, we won't need any kind of armed insurrection. We won't need any violence or bloodshed. It can happen very easily once everyone sees the perception of his own personal sovereignty as a spiritual entity and begins to think about that and the implications that carries once one recognizes that. We are connected to the Creator. Everything that is an effect of a cause is always connected to the cause. You don't have an effect without a cause, and you don't have a cause that doesn't have an effect. If we call creation a cause, then we are the effects of that cause, and we are connected to that creation. And this is the thing that political power hogs in Washington, D.C. have completely lost touch with that reality. They forget that everything to them is the hustle and bustle of the quest for power and how to control people and how to take advantage of the power that they have been entrusted with. So the American people can have a mental revolution. And in fact, when I named that study group the Mental Militia back in 1999, I actually wrote a little dissertation about we would like to spark a mental revolution that would be superior to all governments everywhere. What we're talking about is not just for Americans. It's for every human being born on this planet. It is liberation. It is self-fulfillment. It is a higher awakening. And it is a personal empowerment. And it doesn't require violence. There is no violence required. The mental militia has no interest in telling people to go get guns. We presume all awake Americans already have their guns, but we don't think that the guns is any way to answer this threat. The threat can be answered correctly and most effectively by simply seeing reality and then acting according to what we see. There are things that people can do that helps unplug Leviathan in Washington, D.C., or in London, or in Brussels, or wherever.
Right. Well, one of the things that you're trying to do, and I know G. Edward Griffin has done a similar thing with the Freedom Force folks, and that is to try to bring liberty groups that have a common purpose of protecting individual liberty, protecting private property, protecting the rights, the unalienable rights that we have as humans in a world that is a Christ-centered or God-centered world or universe, recognizing that we do have rights as humans that transcend anything that government can tell us that we have to do if it takes away those rights. And you're trying to get these various groups together. Can you kind of maybe flesh out some of the things that you're working on as far as bringing different groups together to have kind of a common, I guess I'd call it a forum for liberty groups?
Well, yes, indeed. Dan, I've got what I call a triptych, which is a three-sided frame that asks the questions: who is doing it, how are they doing it, and what can be done about it? And the name of that triptych is Mind War. So the answers that I have found begin with Patrick Wood's book, Technocracy Rising. Patrick he's a fabulous researcher. He used to work with Anthony C. Sutton before Mr.
Right, he's
Sutton.
been a guest on our show, so
Yeah.
we got Patrick on our show.
Yeah, you've had some really good people on this show, and I congratulate you for that, Dan. You're doing a great job with that. But Patrick Wood's Technocracy Rising tells us who is doing this. Then there's a young lady that came on Caravan to Midnight last summer during the frenzy over Jade Helm 15. And she wowed J.B. Wells on his show for about 2.5 hours, looking into how they, the technocrats, are employing science to do this. It's how they are doing it. Quantum computers, satellite technology, all kinds of exotic science that the government has, and it is utilizing before it's allowed to go out to the public at large. But she has a website called Level 9 News, and she does really good reports on things like secret government patents for scientific technologies that can be used to literally affect the way people think. Our government, unfortunately, is deeply involved in regulating the thought processes of the public at large. And DJ of Level 9 News makes that very clear and substantiates what I just said. So
sure.
The third picture there would be Dr. Edwin Vieira Jr. and all of his wonderful books. A constitutional attorney and an excellent speaker. Dr. Vieira tells us what we can do about it. And when you start thinking about it, he's right. The answer is the militia. People on the left and the right are deeply concerned about this burgeoning police state, the militarization of our police, and they're concerned, but nobody really knows what to do about it. And of course, Congress isn't going to do anything about it except help expand it. But Dr. Vieira points out that the militia system would eliminate that if the police power was under the authority of the people ourselves through our state official militia. There goes your police militarization. There goes your police abuses, and everybody gets back to being part of the community, including our police. So he's got the answer there for what we can do about it, and it's a cultural shift that, again, has to begin in the mind of every citizen. But backing those three up, I'm friends with a fellow named Richard Gage of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, who is a champion of freedom, and he's a champion of getting the truth out. The government has obviously lied. Well, that's the understatement of the year, I'm sure. But I work with a fellow named James Yeager, who runs Matrix Entertainment, and James builds constitutional issue films, documentaries that usually, in most of his, Ron Paul is a part of the cast. G. Edward Griffin is a part of the cast. I believe G. Edward Griffin is in every one of James's constitutional films, but so is Edwin Vieira. And these guys, when you start putting G. Edward Griffin's Freedom Force International and the principles he's espousing, and you tie that in with the boldness of Richard Gage, who will sit there and tell the U.S. government that the laws of physics do not suspend themselves long enough to allow a bunch of terrorists to tear down big buildings in New York. And then you look into the research done by James Yeager and the marvelous films he produces. Then we also, right at the Mental Militia's website, in addition to those good people, we have Michael Shaw with Freedom Advocates. Michael Shaw is, I call him the pioneer for the anti-Agenda 21 movement. I think he is the ultimate authority in this country on Agenda 21. But we also have Don Doig with the Fully Informed Jury Association, which Don created back in the 1980s to inform jurors of their right to nullify a law in a courtroom. I don't mean undo the law. I don't mean take the law off the books. I'm just saying a jury can nullify a law in that one case in one courtroom for a defendant. And there's a big victory been won recently in New Hampshire, where the judges now by law have to tell the jurors that they have the right and duty to question the law as well as the facts of the case before the court that day.
All right, so, right. And I don't want to interrupt, but we're at the midpoint of our show, and Kelby, I think you need to take this short break, and we will be back in about 2 minutes, and I will let you continue where you left off, Elias.
Great, Dan. Thank you so much.
A story of a common family. So my daughter asked me a very important question. She said, "Dad, why do you work so hard on this republic?" And I answered her, "Well, baby, the republic as given by our founding fathers is the most important form of government ever given to man." I said, "Dad, why don't you let somebody else do it?" I said, "Well, sweetheart, most of America thinks things are okay. And so long as their lives are not upset, they don't have to care about the important things that are taking place in their own country. Your dad likes to do things. I just don't want to sit and wait for somebody else. And if we didn't have our founding fathers, we wouldn't have this country. They were doers. They wanted something great for their children and grandchildren. And sweetheart, so do I." Ladies and gentlemen, I wish I could say that that's what happens in almost every home of our country, but it's not. Just 8 years ago, as a man who watched an $800 billion bailout given to banks when that money could have paid off every home in foreclosure in this country, which would have resulted in the banks getting the money anyway, I realized that we had a problem. And I stood up and I did something about it. I'm asking you to do something about it. I'm asking you to not just listen to these phone calls. I'm asking you to go to republicfortheunitedstates.org and read the Declaration of Sovereign Intent. Understand what we have done over the last 8 years. Understand what our intention is, what we are desiring to do for the people of this nation, and do something about it. Participate in the phone calls. Participate in building your states. Participate in finding a governor, finding a leader, finding the body politic of people that are going to stand up and build the de jure state. This is what we need. We need you to do something about it. We need you to be doers. Wednesday night of every week, we have a Building the States phone call at 6 p.m. Pacific. We encourage you to get on this phone call and understand how you too can be a doer. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Kelby. And Elias, I sorry to break in like that, but I think your comments, incidentally, I have to tell you that a lot of the folks that you mentioned on your discussion of the people that are on your website are also, as you well know, personal friends and are going to be on our program as well. And some have already been on, and some are scheduled. Richard Gage is scheduled now to be on our program in July. We are going to be connecting the dots in ways that a lot of people are going to be somewhat troubled with, but we only ask that you listen, you learn, and you hear what we're talking about, and then go do the research for yourself, and you will find out that we are truly connecting the dots. So with that, Elias, did you want to finish that thought about the groups that you're bringing into the Mental Militia? Elias?
He's on.
I'm sorry, I'm there. Thank you very much, John. Thank you. Yeah, I have a very large list of organizations that I'm bringing in one at a time. And they are not just conservatives. or Republicans or people on the right. I'm also bringing in people on the left. The left and the right are both covered universally under the umbrella of the U.S. Constitution. The Constitution is for everybody. So I was contacted last week by Cynthia McKinney, who is a flaming Democrat, but had the courage on film, and I've got the videos, to pin Donald Rumsfeld's ears to the wall about the war game drills that were going on the morning of 9/11 that completely disabled our defense system. And she pinned him to the wall on the $2.3 trillion that the Pentagon had just announced on September 10 that they were missing. $2.3 trillion. Aside from the horror of that, the fact they lost that money, the real question to me was, and she brought this out, they don't have a budget that big in the first place. So there's a whole lot of it's a deep rabbit hole.
Right.
Cynthia McKinney. I'm bringing in Willie Nelson. I'm bringing in Mr. Shosudevsky for global research. Peter Dale Scott. Other people on the left that I would call left gatekeepers that are just as concerned about where this country is going, and especially the totalitarian nature of what is unfolding. But everybody has something to share, something that's truth on both sides of the aisle. So the Mental Militia, it's for everybody. We're going to unite people in establishing what values do we as Americans want to hold up, and what misperceptions do we want to get rid of or let fall by the wayside, so that we can unite ourselves as people, as a culture. And we don't have to condemn our neighbors. I am not a Christian. I am an agnostic, which means that I just don't think I know enough yet to make an intelligent, informed decision about what I want to believe. So I'm open-minded, and I'm just gathering information at this point in my life. And yet I work really well with good Christian people. You take Jim White of Northwest Liberty News. He's been in the Mental Militia for quite a while. Chuck Baldwin, who has a very maverick type of unique message to the Christian churches in this country. I like Christians. My family is Christian. And I see Christianity under attack. And I also see that Christianity has been greatly misled. They are empowering the very forces that are going to obliterate Christianity in this country by supporting these overseas undeclared illegal wars, by supporting a war on drugs, which implies that the government is asserting ownership over our bodies by telling us what we will and will not put in our bodies. That is asserted ownership, and that is the opposite of freedom. That is a form of slavery. And when the Christian right supports that war on drugs because they're horrified that somebody might smoke a joint, they are literally empowering the mechanism of government that is going to obliterate Christianity. So it is time for the American people to wake up, question what they think, try to form new perceptions, try to look outside their normal habitual ways of seeing things, and if nothing else, at least pull back and hesitate a little bit and question authority genuinely in their own heart and soul. If people will be willing to do that, like I said earlier, we can have a very peaceful mental revolution that would allow the rebirth of the culture of our founding generation, where all of us would be good neighbors and celebrate everybody else's right to do and be who and what they want to be, while everybody else is letting the individual do the same thing. Wouldn't that be a great world?
Be a fantastic world, Elias. I believe that we've got a new guest on our call, and I know that G. Edward Griffin was trying to join our call. Ed, are you on the line?
I don't see him
doesn't
on the call
sound
yet.
okay. I know he was going to try to call in, so we were going to talk about the connection between Freedom Force and the Mental Militia, and basically what we're talking about is I guess a coalition of groups that are willing to work together, that have some basic understandings that they all agree to, and that is unalienable rights and the right of the individual over the collective, and the understanding that private property is a cornerstone of our constitutional system of government, and that private property includes our mind. And I think there's a lot of people that don't really understand that our thoughts and what we do with our mind is private property. And all this political correctness and all this newspeak and thought control and all the things that are going on are direct violations of our private property rights. And I think you would certainly feel that way, Elias, because of the comments that you've made so far. I know you do, because we've talked about it a great deal.
Yeah, you and I have over the years had some great conversations about those sorts of realities. And of course, I totally agree with what you just said. And I think that right now there is an awakening across America of a lot of people who are beginning to understand what we're talking about here. Your concept about your mind being property, it is your property. It is a manifestation of your very soul's existence. And if that's where private property ownership begins. Well, again and again I say, we have to own our minds before we can own anything else. And everything external is a part of what is going on inside our minds. We have powers available to us that are they're unheard of in many circles in American culture. But some people, and I will proudly bring in your psychedelic crowd from back in the 60s and 70s who understood these principles, that everything begins with consciousness. God spake and it was so, or something like that, right? The word came first out of the mind. Everything that happens in our mind is important. And this is why I've been practicing for many, many years, simply saying a small list of affirmations that I speak out loud to myself. Every day I go out on my front porch in my little log cabin, look up above the tree line here in the woods where I live, to the sky, and I repeat these affirmations that tell me and remind me daily what I want to be. What are my values? What is my purpose in life? And the reason I do that, Dan, in 1965, I was a nice college student, young Christian boy who saw the call to arms from the Congress, quit college, joined the Marines, and went to Vietnam. And while I was in the Marine Corps, I had what, and I hate to use this word because it's so overused these days, but I was brainwashed. They call it training, basic training, but it's brainwashing. There was regimen, there were physical regimen, there was psychological stresses applied, there was all kinds of stringent mind-washing, brainwashing activities that took myself, a young Christian, peaceful, poetic kind of guy, and turned me into literally a killing machine for the United States Marine Corps. I was happy to go to Vietnam and start shooting. So I realized when I got out of the war, my goodness, if they could do that to me in just a few months of training down in South Carolina and North Carolina, if they could do that in a few months' time, I could reprogram my own mind myself. and do it without doing so many push-ups while I was at it. So we all can take charge of our minds. We can learn to ask ourselves, what is a thought? Is a thought a cause that has an arc and an effect at the other end of that thought? Does it have an effect anywhere? And I believe they do. I think every thought that we allow in our minds has a consequence or an effect. And when I realized that as a very young man, it kind of charted my course to want to know more and more of what's really going on here in this world. Well, why am I here? What is my purpose in being here? And those kind of poetic or philosophical questions have marked the development of my character for many decades now. And I think anybody can do. I'm a high school graduate. I never even finished college. I'm not a very smart guy. But if I can learn what I've learned, anybody can learn it. And it's not a big bunch of hocus pocus. It's just simply being aware of my thoughts. And what is that, a loving thought or is that a fearful thought? If it's a fear thought, I don't want it in my head. If it's a loving thought, that's what I'm looking for. So I choose the mentality that occupies my mind. And everybody can do that. It's just real simple, real simple. And you do it by starting somewhere and practicing. Every day for a minute, say what you think you want, what you want to be, what you want to do with your life in a few simple sentences. And that repetition is just like in boot camp. Hammering it in again and again and again, day after day after day. If you repeat your affirmations of who you are and who you want to be and how you want to be and the world you want to see and live in, then by George, it finally takes effect over the years. You will see a change in your life and you'll notice, my goodness, those unalienable rights are coming to the fore, and I am proud to be the recipient of that gift from our Creator. And it's a good way to live.
It is. And the one difference between you and I really appreciate your perspective, the fact that you call yourself not a very bright guy. I think that's pretty obvious that you are a very bright guy. But you are self-taught for the most part, and I think a lot of folks are, including myself. What I got out of college was nothing compared to what I've learned after reading 1,000 or so books, and in doing a little bit of research on my own, and finding out where we're at. The one thing that you mentioned early on, in that you are agnostic, and that you really are not, you're not a professed Christian, but I will say that this kind of shows to me that maybe we can bring some folks in that aren't professed Christians, and I am, but there are a number of folks that are not, but have very similar beliefs to what we have, and then in the process we're always hoping, Elias, that you'll give your soul to Christ, and we want to make sure that you go to the right spot. So, but I'm not sure you won't anyway.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. You can go back to biblical stuff. By their fruits shall you know them. We can use language, but we have to realize in China the word God is not the word God. They have a different word for it. In any different culture, any language, there's a different word for God, a different word for Christ. It's language. Language is bound up in three-dimensional reality. We have past, present, and future tenses, and all of our thinking is done in those three tenses, unless we're dreaming. When we're asleep and dreaming, there's another tense that comes to play, but we don't know much about that. But in our conscious wakeful lives, three tenses is where our language operates. And the meaning of the word is one thing. The word itself is only the symbol. if you live in Australia and I say the word tree, you're going to have a different opinion or a different mental image of what a tree looks like than I do sitting up here in northwest Montana looking at trees. So
Sure.
There's one other thing. I believe Jesus Christ said at one point, or he's reputed to have said, "Know ye not that the kingdom of heaven is within you?" It doesn't matter what name you put on it, what word it is, the fruits of your activity, the disposition of your personality, the qualities of your spirit and your soul. That's what Christianity is all about, and it can be in anybody's language. It doesn't have to be found in a church or not in a church. It can be anywhere. It's what is the nature of your being and your deeds. And I live that. I'll probably live a very Christian style life if we use the Christianity's language. I would probably fit in as a very practicing Christian, because the values of Christ, of Paul the Apostle, these guys were talking truth, and I take truth wherever I find it. But I don't have to use the common terminology, because I can tell you this: I know a lot of Christians that are not very Christian, and it was an escape for me of sorts to lose my Christianity when I was in the Vietnam War. Whatever happened to me over there is fairly indescribable, but I came home a different person, and I had always up to that point been a Christian. But I just, for me, it's just a different way of seeing things. And sure. I love Christians. I'm concerned about Christianity in this country. I see a government thrust to limit, curtail, control, and ultimately obliterate Christianity in place and put it in place of their one world religion, which I do know some things about that.
Yeah.
So anyway, you and I work together real well, whether you call me an agnostic or a Christian. We are both seeing the same vision, and we're both dedicating our lives to working to help other people see a better way of establishing freedom and keeping freedom.
Well, I think there's no question, Elias, that the idea, the concept of being a spiritual man is certainly in your makeup, and I know it is in mine, because we are fighting for the ideas that made the United States a Christian nation. And we can call it a number of things, but the bottom line is you're right. One of the things that I think I'm concerned about, as well as you, is the fact that we've turned our Christian religion into a tax deduction or a corporate entity, and we are allowing our churches to become nothing more than maybe tools of the government to silence opposition to a lot of ideas that are good ideas and liberty-minded ideas that they are silencing through their corporate structure in their IRS, 501c3 tax deductions and this sort of thing. And we need to be aware of that.
Totally agree with you. That 501c3 status is Caesar getting in bed with the church, and that does not need to be there. The churches now, I have posted on the Mental Militia website, I have posted a video of a newscast, it's just about 2 minutes, of a minister talking about getting together nationally with a whole bunch of ministers' convention to learn from the IRS what they can and cannot tell the congregation. Now that's on film. I've got it. It's on my website. So that in itself is something all Christians really need to look at. What is the relationship between the government And there again, Chuck Baldwin has a little book called Romans 13, where he goes and lays that out very nicely in that little book. You can get it at his website. I believe that is chuckbaldwinlive.com or .org. But you can see that book there. And excellent little book that shows, we're supposed to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, but by George, who says what is Caesar's? And in this country, we are the Caesar. All authority, all autonomy, all sovereignty issues forth from the unalienable, unalienable rights that we're born with. And we extend those rights out to our community, to our county governments, to our state governments, and through our states into this compact we created called a federal government. But the source of all that sovereignty that all these governments like to lord over us, the source is we the people. And that's why it's the first 3 words in that document. You know what I mean?
Yep, I sure do, buddy. One thing I wanted to mention, and this is something you led into earlier, but how this is being now manifest into a world government under UN Agenda 21, where literally all of our rights, all of our national sovereignty will be eliminated in the name of a collectivist world government, and that's been sold to a lot of people. How do we counteract that, Elias?
We have to go back to the basics. We have to go back to our personal identity, our id entityship. If you break down the word identity, it's the id entity. We have responsibility to know who we are. We also have a subsequent responsibility to know what is our purpose. And after those comes the idea that also, we have the freedom to do and be who and how we want to be. So that's where it all begins. Until the American people reclaim their own minds and get rid of Wall Street, get rid of the television, get rid of the newspaper headlines, get rid of Hollywood. And I'm not talking about all of Hollywood, but there's a lot of Hollywood. As James Yeager is bringing out in his new film, Mainstream, Hollywood and the New York media are complicit in issuing in a globalist, one world government, new world order. And they're programming the mass mind of America through these channels. So it's something else. I just said the word channels, and it reminds me, being an old hippie, you remember a guy named Leonard Cohen? He was a poet.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
He has a line in one of his songs that says, "The rich have got their channels in the bedrooms of the poor." And that is an immortal line. There ain't a house in this country hardly that hadn't got a doggone TV in there. And one thing I've done recently, it just started last year, looking into who financed the science to create television. Well, I'll be doggone. Same families that gave us the Federal Reserve, same families that gave us the AMA to protect the pharmaceuticals industry, same family that gave us the American Historical Society, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission. Those same group of people are who created television, and they've sold it to everybody, and most Americans are addicted to it in one degree or another.
Right.
So
I Elias, I hate to cut this conversation short, but we're close to the end. Would you like to tell folks about your website and about your information very quickly?
I would just say this in an apologetic way. I'm an old, slow guy. My website is not completed. I've been working on it for many months, and it is looking much better. It's out there at the Mental Militia.net. So be patient with me. You'll see a lot of good links and a lot of links that haven't been loaded yet. But we are building something new and different that I think is going to appeal to a lot of people. And I hope your listeners will go check it out, sign up for our emails, and even join the Mental Militia. That would be awesome. And thank you, Dan, so much for having me on.
Well, thank you, Elias, and I welcome our audience to return with us next week to another episode of Connecting the Dots, and we will have continue to have the quality guests that we had tonight and have had in the past, and I guarantee you that we will eventually, and I think we're doing it very quickly, help you in connecting the dots. So thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. And Kelby, it's yours.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's going to conclude our show for this week. We'll see you next Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific. God bless. Good night.
It was 1776 when the founders signed the writ of independence from the Brits. It was revolution. Now an enemy from within would enslave us all again and deprive us of our rights in the Constitution. Restore the Republic. Wake up, it's time to understand.